Good to know.
Good to know.
Good to know.
Good to know.
While it can be awkward talking about sex, especially at church, it's important to have this conversation in a place where you're loved and supported. Talking about sex is the truth you need to know about the stuff that you don't want to talk about. When we see something we really want, it's hard not to give in to that temptation. Temptation means wanting to do something that may not be best for us. We may know sex is something God created to be good, but we can be tempted to experience it in a way that's not God's best for us. Some of you are tempted to do sexual things and sometimes give in. Some of you are just starting to feel temptation and curiosity about it. Some of you may not feel tempted, but you are tempted by other things. Feelings, curiosity, and desires are normal. They shouldn't cause shame, guilt, or fear. God designed sex as a good thing for us to experience within a marriage as part of God's plan for our lives. It's part of His perfect plan. What are we supposed to do if we're tempted by sex before we're married? Well, Paul, one of the leaders of the early church, wrote to the Corinthians about struggling with temptation when it comes to sex. And he said, "Run from sexual sin. No other sin clearly affects the body as this one does, for sexual immorality is a sin against your own body." Paul encouraged us to run from temptation of sex outside of God's designed plan, because no other sin affects the body the way that sexual sin does. Sex includes the body, mind, heart, and emotions. This means that sex outside of God's design has the potential to hurt those parts of us and those of the other person. Paul continued saying this, "Don't you realize that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, who lives in you and was given to you by God? You do not belong to yourself, for God bought you with a high price. So you must honor God with your body." Because we're God's creation, we should choose sexual integrity. Sexual integrity is choosing to respond to sexual desires that we feel, think, or experience in a way that honors ourselves, others, and God. We should run from the temptations that encourage us to use or choose something other than sexual integrity. Because God created us to be valued by both ourselves and by others. Consent, agreeing to do something, or allowing something to take place matters a lot. Nobody has permission to treat your body as anything other than God's creation, something to be respected and honored. It's normal to feel temptation when it comes to sex, but God gives us help to make wise choices. The temptations in your life are no different from what others experience, and God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, He will show you a way out so that you can endure. When we face temptation, God will help us with a way out. He gave us the Holy Spirit to help us identify what we feel tempted to choose, something that isn't sexual integrity. One of the best ways to deal with temptation is to set boundaries. Boundaries can protect us from making unwise choices when it comes to sex, and they can show us when we're getting close to making a decision that isn't best for us. Boundaries are good, but they are also very powerful. Here are 3 things that we can do when we find ourselves tempted by sex. First, identify the temptation. Think about how, where, and when you're tempted by sex or are having a hard time choosing sexual integrity. Second, change your mindset. Instead of asking how far can you go, think about how can you honor yourself, others, and God with the actions and thoughts that you're choosing. And third, set some boundaries to help you when you are tempted. Like I said earlier, boundaries are good and boundaries are powerful. To help you set boundaries, talk to a trusted adult or a leader in your church. They can help you because it's a great place to start figuring out what boundaries you should set and how to keep them in place. I want to ask you a question before we take off. What's one boundary you could set for yourself?
Good to know.
Good to know.
Good to know.
Good to know.